Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the fruit of the Spirit with Kurt Bjorklund.
So gentleness has been contrasted, we've been contrasting it with the works of the flesh in Galatians 5:20, and there's three words that form a single picture: rivalries, dissensions, and divisions. Rivalries simply means factions, choosing up sides. Dissensions is, in a sense, distinguishing self from others. And divisions had a specific religious connotation. Skye Jethani writes about this, and he says this about anger, and we saw anger yesterday, and how anger is often tied to divisions and distinctions. He says, for this reason, anger has been elevated to a virtue in much of our culture. With it, we are able to define ourselves by who we stand against rather than the ideals we stand for. In a twisted way, we've become dependent on our enemies. They give our lives definition, our beliefs, boundaries, and our mission and opponent. For many people today, including those who identify as Christians, enemies are what give our lives and communities meaning. And then he continues, he says, of course, this is not a new phenomenon. There's an old saying of uncertain origin that says, a friend is someone who has all the same enemies you have. It has always been our sinful human nature to organize our social lives around those who share our fears and prejudices. This was no less evident in the ancient world of the Bible, where Jews defined themselves by who they were not. They were not filthy, idol-worshipping, sexually immoral, pork-eating, unrighteous, scripturally ignorant Gentiles. Their contempt for non-Jews was so strong that Gentiles were often referred to as dogs. And of course, the hatred was mutual. Many Gentiles harbored contempt and disdain for the Jews who did not join in the practices and worship of the Roman Empire. Imagine the shock, therefore, when a new community emerged where Jews and Gentiles worshiped together, shared the table, and called one another brothers and sisters. It was scandalous. It was even shameful. Rather than defining themselves by their hatred for their group within the church, both Jews and Gentiles learned to release their hate and instead define themselves based on Christ's love. Gentleness will show itself in this new community mindset that says, I do not need to pick up sides. I do not need to be at odds with people to feel good about myself. Here's what Parker Palmer once wrote about it. In true community, we will not choose our companions, for our choices are so often limited by self-serving motives. Instead, our companions will be given us by grace. Often they will be persons who will upset our settled view of self and world. In fact, we might define true community as the place where the person you least want to live with lives. What he's saying is that instead of always saying, I have to choose my perfect social community, that gentleness accepts and welcomes people who are different and are not our natural allies, but instead might even be our natural enemies. So let me just ask you today, do you work constantly to segment your life into people more and more like you, so that you define yourself by your community, even religiously, rather than welcoming people with a spirit of hospitality and gentleness into your world that allows you to communicate care to people rather than boundaries and saying you don't belong? If you do, then gentleness has started to become a hallmark. But to the degree that you are practicing what Galatians 5 calls rivalries, dissensions, and divisions, then gentleness has not been part of the fruit of the Spirit. And we started this week by saying the fruit of the Spirit grows together. So you may have a naturally passive, somewhat gentle disposition toward people, but real gentleness will grow beyond just simply being nice to be nice, to embracing people who are different, to not being filled with jealousy, to not having a contentious disposition or accepting alienation in our lives. And that is evidence of the Spirit of God in you. And it's a celebration of what Jesus has done in reaching past alienation and inviting us into relationship with him, satisfying the anger of God that was rightly toward us, and welcoming us from a group that was in alienation. And that knowledge is what gives us the gentleness of soul and spirit to extend it to others.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.